Dad log, star date 01082021. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Legion. Happy Friday, and welcome back to the Dad Logs Revisited. Strap in, suit up. Let's take you on an adventure. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to give you a little overview of what the Dad Logs Revisited is going to entail. Something I want to cover with the Dad Logs Revisited, ladies and gentlemen, is going through the previous 150 plus episodes of the Dad Logs and pulling out the main ideas that those small tidbits of knowledge shared with you previously. And I want to revamp them. I want to revisit ones that are still relevant today. And I want to go back and reflect on some of the things that maybe changed from the knowledge that I shared in previous Dad Logs. That is what I want to do with the Dad Logs Revisited. This is episode 1, and I hope you enjoy. Today, I'm going to give you a dad's tale and talk a little bit about resting on your laurels. Now, for those of you who have never heard the saying resting on your laurels, it basically means that you rest in your successes. You rest in the things that made you successful, and you quit doing the things that made you successful in the first place. So today I want to talk to you guys about just that. Exactly what I did about a year ago and how I've learned from it. I want to talk a little bit about getting too comfortable. It can be very, very easy once you've done something for a certain period of time to get too comfortable, right? It's easy to go on autopilot. I found that when I started streaming regularly, it got very, very easy to quit innovating. It got very easy to go on autopilot, to hit the go live button, launch the game, still talk to the people in chat, absolutely. But it was the same thing over and over and over again. And what I think I found over the course of that time is that people get bored easily. People, as technology has become more streamlined and easier to use, people's attention spans have shortened significantly. People are no longer entertained in the same ways that they used to be entertained. And I found that if you don't challenge yourself to create new experiences, create new content, maybe pick up a new game, learn new things, develop a new experience for someone who has been in your channel for a very long time. If you're not overcoming challenges, you're going to fail. You are going to see a dip in the way that people engage with you. You're going to see regulars that are going to leave. This is something that I have mentally been struggling with over the past year, is why do people leave? And I got a lot of feedback on a Twitter post recently that kind of put it in perspective, is that things change, people's lives change, and especially during this pandemic, during 2020, it has been challenging for people to enjoy life. A lot of people have struggled with a lot of things. And so those challenges are something that need to be pursued as a content creator. If you're not challenging yourself and forcing yourself to overcome those challenges, you become stagnant in your content. So something that I find very interesting And something that I think flipped for me was when I went full time. So in September of 2019, I had my job terminated. They actually, the previous job I worked in had sold off the division I was a part of. And so there was an acquisition and a merger going on, and my role at the company ended in September. And at that time, it made sense for me to jump off, to go full-time content creation. Mixer was doing fairly well. I was doing very well on Mixer. It made sense for me to pursue this full time, and I spent the next 9 months on Mixer, growing and being consistent. I think when I went full time, there was something in my head that flipped, though, and this was a bad thing that happened. Over the course of those 9 months, I got it in my head that I had made it. And the idea that you've made it, right? Just because you've hit a goal, or when you get partnered, or if you go full time, or if you have some sort of criteria that you dictate or determine that means that you've made it, don't let that creep in your head. Don't let that suddenly mean that, okay, I don't have to innovate anymore. I don't have to do the things that made me successful previously, because that is when things will start to downturn. That is when things will start to fester. You will find yourself in a place mentally where you think you've made it and you continue to do the things that you used to do, but those things stop working. Those things stop being as engaging as you think they were. People will not respond in the same ways, and especially people who have been a longtime member of your community will not respond in the same ways that new people will, right? The more content you create, the more time you spend creating content and creating an experience, the more you need to innovate and adapt, the more you need to create new experiences, because those people who are your regulars, they are not going to stick around if you continue to do the same thing day in and day out for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. They want to see something new. They want to see something fresh. It could be something like updating your overlays. It could be something like creating a new experience that they can use their channel points or your currency on, right? It is important that once you think you've made it, that you realize you haven't, because you never make it. Don't forget that you never make it. It's super important. Always be innovating. Always be focusing on creating that next experience. Always be hungry to continue to make an experience that people love coming back to day after day after day after day. Because if I've learned anything in content creation, it's that people want fresh and new. People want that energy that drew them to you in the first place. And that energy doesn't have to be necessarily be high, super hype energy, right? It could be they really, really dig those chill vibes. If you're one of those chill vibe streamers, make sure that you're still continuing to innovate and tailor the experience so that the old becomes new, and so that people who are your regulars, people who are your ride or dies, the people who have stuck by you through the ups and downs of content creation, have a reason to come back for another day. And that's super important. Get out of your head that you think you've made it, because if you think you've made it and you live like you've made it, you're no longer going to be hungry to create that experience that drives engagement for the people who have been with you from day one. Don't ever get it in your head that you've made it. Stay hungry to create new and better content, new and better experiences, because that is what the viewer will demand of you. What I've learned over the course of this journey is that it's almost easier to obtain new viewership. And by obtain new viewership, I mean when a new person comes into your channel, it's fresh and exciting. It's easier to have those people stick around than it is to have people who have spent 2,000 hours in your chat not leave. You have to work harder at keeping people engaged than you do at obtaining new engagement. So remember that when you put it in your head that I'm going to come out and I'm going to build a new experience, my suggestion would be to build that experience with your regulars in mind. Because remember, a new person to your chat, everything's new. The whole experience is brand new. And it's easier for that person to accept that this is a really cool thing than it is to take one of your regulars and say, this change is worthwhile. Stick with me on this journey, right? So always be thinking about how you're going to create an experience that is going to drive your regulars to stay and entertain your regulars that have stuck with you through the highs and lows, in addition to looking at what can I do that's really going to draw in a new viewer and make them a regular in the first place, right? This is why it's so important to not get in the head space of saying, I've made it, because then then you're not hungry anymore. Then you stop innovating. You stop doing the things that helped you succeed in the first place. And this is one of the things that I fell into when I went full time. Somewhere along the lines, I stopped doing the things that helped me to succeed in the first place. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I always did when I first started creating content is I would get done with the stream and I would tweet about anyone who hosted me, anyone who subbed to me, anyone, like I would show my gratitude on Twitter for the whole world to see. And I truly believe that people gravitated towards that. They could see in my actions the gratitude that I had. And somewhere along the lines, I stopped doing that. And I don't know why. I still don't know why. But I'm getting back into that routine because I do truly believe that showing your gratitude through action is something that helps people to really understand and accept and respect that your gratitude is truly gratitude and not just something to show engagement or to fake. True gratitude is in the actions that you take with other people that have given you their time or given of their finances or whatever the case might be. So that's just one example of something that at some point I stopped doing that along the way. And that's something that I'm picking back up. That's something that I'm going to start doing again, or something that I've started doing again since I realized that I stopped doing that. Another example of something that I used to do that I no longer do anymore is when I got a big raid, if someone brought in 25 people or 50 people, I used to stop what I was doing and I used to sing them a song, because something that makes my channel unique is that while I'm primarily a gaming channel, I also like to sing. I like to pick up the guitar and I like to sing for you guys. I am an entertainer, not just from a gaming standpoint, but from a music standpoint as well, right? And so something that I did previously that somewhere along the line I stopped doing was for big raids, paying that extra attention and singing a song for the chat. And it's easy to get in the mindset of generating excuses for yourself. There was a stretch in my content creation career where I was sick all the time. I was throwing my voice out all the time because I wasn't properly monitoring myself, monitoring my own vocals. I wasn't properly doing that. In addition to learning how to finesse my voice, right? And that's something that the more content you create, that's something that you have to learn along the way, is that your voice does have a limit. The amount of time every single day that you can spend talking requires vocal care, right? And so something that's worth looking into, if you're starting to get to a point where you're casting 5-6 nights a week for hours on end, is making sure that you're taking care and resting your voice. You need to rest your voice. You need to take care of your voice. Tea, making sure that you're not drinking a lot of dairy products or eating a lot of dairy products, because that produces phlegm in your throat, which makes it very difficult to power through hours and hours and hours of talking, right? I've gotten down to a point where I drink pretty much, for the most part, tea, water, and coffee. Even coffee, you have to be careful, right? Because there's a lot of caffeine in coffee. The more caffeine you take in, the more dehydrated you are, the harder it is to maintain vocal clarity over the course of time. So make sure that when you're looking at going full time, or when you're looking at ramping up your schedule, that you're taking care of yourself physically, in addition to taking care of yourself mentally. It's important to be looking at your overall well-being, because burnout is real. That's something else that I experienced, and something that's very hard to deal with mentally is hitting a point of burnout. When you realize that your content is suffering because you've been going, and you've not stopped, taken a step back and said, okay, what's going on? I'm drained. My content seems to be suffering. People are saying things. And it's one thing to determine if people are saying things out of jealousy and envy and just trying to tear you down, versus people who are genuinely concerned for your well-being, right? There's two very different sides, and you can generally tell that by the amount of time that someone has spent in your channel. But if someone comes to you and they say, hey, I'm worried about you, it seems like you're out of sorts. What's going on, right? It's coming from a place of genuine interest and care. When people start to ask you those questions, it might be time to take a step back and say, okay, what's going on in my life that is impacting my content and my ability to entertain and to build community? Take a step back and be like, okay, I need to address this thing before I continue to put the pedal all the way to the floor and move forward. So be okay with knowing that it might be time to take just a little bit off the gas in order to get your mental well-being squared away. The last point that I want to make, and something that I think is super important, is having the ability to humble yourself and to know when you need help. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you're asking for help from a technical standpoint. There's a lot of resources out there. A lot of people have done a lot of really cool things from a technical standpoint in their streams, right? I've done a fair bit of innovation myself. I know how to use OBS and the tools that I have available to me. But it's okay to ask for help. There are things that I have not figured out on my own that I have asked other broadcasters for help with, because the reality is that we should have the attitude that we're all in this together. I know that this space is highly competitive. I know that people are always looking at what other people are doing, and they're like, how can I get a one-up on that next guy? That's something that I've worked really, really hard to not fall into, because the fact of the matter is that the more that you try and take a bite out of someone else, the more you're going to get bit back, right? So humble yourself. Ask for help when you need it. Take a step back, know that you don't know everything, and ask for help. And this could be help, again, from a technical standpoint, but this could also be help from a mental standpoint, right? Do not be afraid to ask someone to sit down and talk. I've had multiple people who I'm going to be reaching out to over the next few weeks to just sit down and have a chat with. People who I consider mentors, people who I consider friends, people who I've met along this journey, other full-time creators, other part-time creators, who have taken notice of what I'm going through mentally and have said, hey, if you need to chat, I'm here. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And again, if I know this is coming to you in 2021, but if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we need to rely on each other to support one another in ways that we have never had to do before. People are going through a lot of really hard things right now. And if you're a content creator who is struggling, and especially if you're a full-time content creator who is struggling, because if you're anything like me, numbers are down across the board because people are struggling mentally, people are struggling financially, and it's hard, right? Make sure you reach out. Going back to the idea of thinking you've made it, it can be very easy to get a little bit of an ego, to get a little bit of that big head, to say, I'm seeing success. And then you start acting like it. And that was something that I told myself early on in my career. I said, I don't ever want to get to a point where I look at success and I think I've made it and I stop being humble. And it's easy to slip into that mindset where you see the numbers going up and up and up. You got more people coming in, you look at the viewer numbers, you look at the sub numbers, and you say things are going up and up and up. I'm doing it. I made it. I'm a success. And then you start to forget and to treat people with respect. And it's not that I ever out and out treated someone disrespectfully, but you get to a point where you start to fail to recognize the small raids, the people who are coming in with 2 or 3 people, and they're raiding your channel, and they're bringing their whole community. And even though it's a small community, there's people in that community, and you need to welcome them as such. You need to recognize the effort and that someone's putting themselves out there and that they're showing you love by bringing their 2 or 3 people by and saying hello. At some point, that became less valuable than the big raids for me. And that was something that I had to step way back and say, why am I not showing people love when they come in, even with a small raid? Now, I know that, and this might be something that, bigger creators hit a point where they would literally just be doing shout outs the whole stream, right? And I think that's part of why I stopped being as excited about those small raids as I used to be, because you hit a point, and especially on Mixer, I mean, there were times where I was getting 75 hosts a stream. And it was hard to tell because Mixer didn't have that built in. They didn't have the difference between a raid and a host, right? At some point, I lost the appreciation that I had for even the small raids. And I think this is a struggle that really small streamers or folks that are starting out with their they get frustrated with the idea that bigger streamers don't care about us. If you're in that boat where you think that bigger streamers don't care about us, I want to offer you a little bit of perspective. And again, you can take this whole thing with a grain of salt, but to provide you with perspective, again, I did this full time on Mixer for 9 months before Mixer shut down. And I got to a point where we were seeing anywhere between 50 and 75 hosts in a 6-hour period. right? If you do the math on that, and if you shouted out every single host that you got, so let's say for a nice even number, we had 50 hosts. Let's say 60 hosts in a 6-hour period. That's 10 hosts an hour. That means that every 6 minutes, you would be shouting someone out in your content. And I think this is something that when I took a step back, trying to balance the appreciation of someone who has taken the time to host you. And it makes it infinitely harder when there's a lot of auto hosts that happen. But taking the time to appreciate someone who has hosted you, I think is important. It's taking that second to humble yourself, to remember that at one point you were there, and to appreciate someone for taking their community and putting their community in your hands. That's a super easy way to humble yourself and to say, doesn't matter how big I am, I appreciate you hosting my channel. Thank you for bringing your community by and making sure that you stay humble with it. Legion, I want to thank you all for sticking with me through this journey. I know the past year has been a little bit of a rough one, but it's good to be coming out of it, and it's good to be revisiting the dad logs. If y'all enjoyed this content, make sure you like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Make sure you follow our Facebook page, and make sure you favorite the podcast if you're listening on one of your favorite podcast platforms. I appreciate you guys stopping on in. We're going to have another Dad Logs Revisited podcast episode coming to you next Friday. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with be life, be love. And as always, God bless and good games. We'll see you guys next time.